Jeff, welcome.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us here on VOA. Let's delve into it. We're here for the AfroTech Executive Summit. Talk to us a little more about that.
Yeah, so to understand AfroTech Executive, you've got to understand AfroTech Conference. So AfroTech Conference is something that Blavity Inc. has been doing since 2016. We started AfroTech because people said that there was a pipeline problem with diverse hiring in Silicon Valley. So startups, some of the biggest tech companies in the world said, you know, if we could only find Black people and African people, we'd hire them, but we don't know where to look. We don't know where to go. So we had this radical idea. We said, well, we'll bring all those people here. We'll bring the Black people, we'll bring the women, we'll bring Africans, we'll bring all the people you say you can't find. We'll bring them to Silicon Valley to your doorstep so you have no excuse. You just have to show up. We did that in 2016. We started that conference with 600 people. And AfroTech has grown now to be a conference where over 20,000 people came last year in Austin, Texas, to AfroTech conference last November. So AfroTech, the brand, AfroTech, the community, AfroTech, the experience, is all about connecting diverse talent to companies, to venture capital, to all these opportunities to change the world. What we're doing here with AfroTech Executive is a special summit for thought leaders and executives to talk about some of the pressing topics in the world, but also some of the emerging topics, and really spur people to take action to push forward change. And so this is our second time here in DC. We love being here in DC because there are a lot of policymakers here. There are a lot of influential people that can make things happen. So having the types of conversations that we're having today here in the nation's capital, I think is really, really important.
The name itself, AfroTech, to link it directly to the continent itself, Africa. Talk to me more about how your organization is empowering young people in the tech sector in Africa.
Well, we can't forget our origin story, right? So I think with a lot of Black Americans, and I'll speak for myself being one, the fact that we are descendants of Africa sometimes is lost because our history is lost to slavery, right? And we have to be very, very intentional about remembering that, leaning into it, and then paying it forward and paying it back to the continent. So as much as we are passionate about leveling up Black Americans here in the US, we also want to make sure that the continent of Africa benefits. When we think about these new emerging industries, the fourth industrial revolution, right? We want to make sure that Africa is not only a beneficiary, but a leader of the pack, someone that can use a continent that can use its unique problems, its unique skill sets, and its unique people to really create new industries, influence the rest of the world, and export some of that knowledge so that we all benefit.
The tech industry in Africa itself is actually one of the biggest growing sectors on the continent. How is, if we take a look at the work that you guys are doing as an institution, how is that aiding growing that sector? And of course, employment, how is that aiding? Yeah,
so one thing that I think is very, very important is that people in the US have to look at Africa as more than just a source for lower cost labor. There's a ton of tech talent in Africa, and I think sometimes it can be a bit exploitative where people say, oh, well, I can go hire African developers and they're going to be cheaper. We can't look at that talent on the continent in that way. We've really got to understand that Africa, with so many opportunities, natural resources, like there are so many different problem spaces, opportunity areas in Africa that developers are working on and have a unique perspective, and they can export that perspective to the US and the rest of the world in a way that others can't. And so that's the opportunity. The thing that we're going to be talking about here at AfroTech Executive in DC across both of our panels is going to be about collaboration. It's this idea that we are a global economy. We are a big, gigantic world, and we've all got to work together. We've all got to collaborate. And that collaboration has to include the continent of Africa because there are so many unique opportunities there. And we can't just look at it as a way to say, well, oh, there's cheap talent there. We've got to look at the continent of Africa and the talent there and all the unique things happening there with respect, with humility, with an ear and an eye to learn, and really ourselves figure out what Africa can show us about how to do what we do better.
I am curious about that. What is it that Africa can show, you know, the U.S.? The U.S. is considered the first world. What is it that Africa has to offer the US?
I think perseverance, right? And that's something where, you know, as Black people in America, we are accustomed to having to persevere, having to be better than the rest in order just to get a seat at the table, having to, you know, overperform just to make it by. Africa knows that as well, right? The continent has a history of having to overcome, and African people all over the continent are survivors. They persevere. They are talented. And we have a lot to learn from that rich history. And I think that that's something that not only can Black Americans look at and really benefit from and take inspiration, but Americans of all stripes can.
Now to zone in on the United States, including members of the diaspora, we formulate the minority in the United States.
Yeah.
Early on, you talked about how you guys are looking to promote the minority groups. Talk to me a little more about that. How are you empowering members of the diaspora, women, and other minority groups?
Yeah, so we're big believers in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We launched a new SaaS product called Talent Infusion to make it easier for companies to hire diverse talent. And we don't just believe in diversity because it sounds good. All the data shows, study shows that teams that are more diverse, and that isn't just diverse in terms of Black people and white people or men and women, but it's diversity of viewpoints, diversity of age, diversity of background, diversity in every sense of the word. Those teams perform much better. They have better financial returns. They make better products. They are able to understand their customers better. Diversity is not just a nice to have, it's essential. And when we say diversity, I really do want to emphasize that we can't just think about that as surface level, right? It's not the low-hanging fruit. We really have to challenge ourselves, and that includes when we think about the diaspora itself. It isn't just Black Americans, right? It isn't just, descendants of slavery when we think about the diaspora and we think about the diversity of people of color and how we need to show up in tech and how we need to be shown up for. And so that's why it's so important for us to be inclusive and why we're dedicating a big part of today's AfroTech Executive to talk about Africa and what we in the US can do from a policy standpoint to make sure that we are cultivating that tech ecosystem, playing a role, and also helping Africa do what it does best. And that is, export great tech talent to the world.
In closing, Jeff, what words of advice would you have for the young African who's watching the works that you guys are doing and looking for a way to grow the continent itself?
I would say keep building. The cool thing about the internet and understanding that not everyone has access, there are still broadband deserts, there are still gaps in access, but as much as there is anything in the world that has this quality, the internet is the great equalizer. If you have a connection, if you can get on the internet, you have access to knowledge. You have access to the ability to consume. You have access to the ability to create. And so my advice to young African founders, African people in tech is to keep building, keep experimenting, keep creating. Just put your work out there, get feedback, collaborate. You never know what's going to take off. Me and my co-founders at Blavity, we tried so many things before Blavity. We built so many companies before. We didn't know Blavity would be the one to take off, but it was. So you never know which is going to be your big break. You never know what is going to have the impact on the world. So just keep building.
Perseverance is the message.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.